A 37-year-old CEO who runs a chain of luxury hotels unexpectedly comes across a young female employee secretly washing children's clothes in the staff sink during a night shift. She begs him not to report her to management, but that moment not only pulls him back to the hardships of his past, it also opens the door to a story that will change both of their lives. The wall clock in the Harbor Light Hotel staff lounge ticked toward midnight. Harsh fluorescent light spilled over the white porcelain sink, where a pair of small, calloused hands worked a steady rhythm, twisting fabric in the cold water. The faint trickle from the tap blended with a quickened, but controlled, breath forming a quiet cadence, like the heartbeat of a long night. Clara Monroe, 26, wearing a faded housekeeping uniform, her hair hastily tied into a ponytail, was bent over, scrubbing a set of children's clothes. A washed-out blue t-shirt and a tiny pair of jeans lay drenched on an old towel beside her. The air carried the faint scent of cheap detergent, mingling with the dampness of the break room. Her hands, reddened from the cold water, still pressed firmly over every stain, as if keeping these clothes clean was the only way to keep her small world from falling apart. The door creaked open softly, yet loud enough to make Clara flinch. She spun around, heart plunging. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, a heavy tool bag slung over one arm. His gray t-shirt was worn, his jeans slightly faded, and there was a faint smell of metal and machine oil around him. I'm sorry, Clara stammered, her voice trembling as her gaze darted away. I didn't take anything from the hotel. I don't have the quarters to use the laundromat. And my son, he only has a few outfits. I'll clean this up right away. Please, don't tell management. I can't lose this job. The man said nothing for a few seconds. His smoky gray eyes took in the scene before him, the sink, the small pile of children's clothes, her trembling hands as if absorbing each detail, frame by frame. I'm here to fix the plumbing, he said quietly, his voice deep and free of judgment. Clara looked up, startled. A faint streak of soap clung to her cheek. A few loose strands of hair had slipped down to brush against her face. He stepped inside, set the tool bag down on the floor, and crouched beside the sink. The cabinet door beneath it hung loose on its hinges. Inside, the drain pipe was rusted, a thin trickle of water leaking down. He could have fixed it in 5 minutes, but he didn't start right away, because the sight before him had already unlocked a memory he thought he had buried for good. Himself at 19, crouched by a sink in a gas station bathroom, scrubbing the only shirt he owned with a bar of cheap soap, avoiding the mirror because he couldn't bear to meet his own eyes. That man was Ethan Ward, 37 years old, CEO and founder of the Harbor Light Hotel chain, one of the fastest-growing brands on the East Coast. But tonight, as he had many times over the years, he wore the role of an unremarkable maintenance worker. For Ethan, this wasn't a publicity stunt or some undercover PR move. It was a habit he had kept since opening his very first hotel, quietly blending in with the staff, listening, observing, spotting inefficiencies and staffing issues, and cutting waste, the exact reasons the Harbor Light chain had flourished. And sometimes, it gave him the chance to help people others would have simply overlooked. But he hadn't expected that. On a quiet night shift, he would come face to face with a scene so familiar that it felt like he was staring into his own past. Right here, under the cold, unyielding light, Ethan Ward had grown accustomed to stepping into quiet rooms, the kind where no one paid attention to whoever stood in the far corner. It was a habit formed when he was very young. He had never known his parents' faces. A car accident took them both when he was just 2 years old. His childhood passed through foster families and then group homes, places where the scent of bleach and the sound of doors slamming shut became part of daily life. He learned to stay silent, to observe, and to understand that if he wanted to survive, he had to take care of himself. At 18, aged out of the system, Ethan stepped into the world with nothing but empty hands. He slept in shelters, under bridges, or in staff break rooms from short-term jobs. His meals came from leftover bread, watered-down coffee, and, sometimes, the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Once, while working as a waiter in a small hotel, he discovered something. The biggest problems in a hotel often lived in places management never set foot: late-night kitchens, linen closets, maintenance rooms. From then on, he made it a practice to blend in with frontline staff, to see problems firsthand, to find ways to fix them, and to never overlook someone in need. From that foundation, Ethan built Harbor Light Hotels, starting with a small seaside inn and slowly expanding into a renowned chain along the East Coast. He ran it with near absolute precision and a heart locked behind layers of steel. He became a millionaire before 40. His name was tied to major deals, bold efficiency campaigns, and, in the eyes of many employees, he was a strict, unpredictable CEO. But no matter how high his success climbed, every time he looked in the mirror, he still saw that young man crouched by a sink, scrubbing his only shirt, praying no one would walk in. Just a few floors away, Clara Monroe was working herself to exhaustion every day, yet few knew her full story. 4 years earlier, Clara had been a third-year medical student at a prestigious university. She loved her field, loved the idea that she could save someone's life. But then, one pregnancy test, showing 2 pink lines, changed everything. Her boyfriend left as soon as he found out. Her studies were cut short. She gave birth alone in a small rented apartment, and eventually moved back in with her mother to save on expenses. When her mother fell ill and could no longer care for Leo, Clara found a housekeeping job at Harbor Light. The hotel gave her a small staff room, enough for a single bed and a folding table. Her wages barely covered food and basic living costs. A public laundromat down the street was a luxury. Most of Leo's clothes were washed by hand in the sink after her shift. When the floor was quiet, Clara didn't work just to survive. She worked with pride. Even when exhausted, she greeted guests, helped coworkers who were struggling, and, no matter the pressure, she always made time in the afternoons to pick up Leo from the community daycare. Leo was the one reason Clara kept moving forward. The 5-year-old had his mother's bright eyes, a soaring imagination, and an innocent heart untouched by the worries of rent or bills. He could spend hours drawing dinosaurs on scraps of paper, turning them into a museum displayed on the walls of the staff room. He had a habit of running straight into his mother's arms after daycare, hugging her tight, and chattering about his latest discovery, a heart-shaped stone he found on the playground, or a story he invented about a T-Rex that knew how to make soup. That night, when Ethan saw Clara bent over the sink, he realized he wasn't just looking at an employee in a difficult moment. He was looking at a version of himself years ago, someone who still believed that if you just pushed a little harder, somehow, things would be okay. What he didn't know was that, within days, small moments between them would begin to unfold. Moments powerful enough to change everything. From that night on, Ethan found himself noticing the hallways where Clara worked. Not intentionally, but every time he pushed his tool cart past, his steps slowed, giving him a few more seconds to watch. She always arrived earlier than required. When the clock was still 10 minutes to 7, while most staff were still in the locker room, Clara was already in the linen closet, inspecting each bundle. She stacked towels in neat towers nearly to her shoulder, sorted bedsheets by color and size, and tied them securely with elastic so the cart wouldn't shift. Everything sat perfectly in place, as if she believed this small order could keep the whole day from unraveling. Ethan had caught her quietly replacing a burnt-out bulb in a guest room, without calling maintenance, just because the guests were due back and she didn't want them stepping into a dark space. Another time, while polishing a glass door, she heard a crash at the end of the hall and abandoned her work to help a coworker gather a heavy pile of towels that had fallen. No one had asked her. No one recorded it, but she did it anyway. He also noticed details others might overlook. Her sneakers worn down at the heels, her hands rough and cracked from cleaning chemicals, her dark blonde hair always tied high and tight so it wouldn't get in the way, and the way she greeted everyone from receptionists to security to kitchen staff in her real voice, not the rehearsed courtesy people use when they don't mean it. Ethan had worked in enough environments to know those actions weren't common. They came from discipline and self-respect, qualities he valued more than skill. That afternoon, He was in the grand ballroom repairing the lighting system. A halogen bulb had blown, a backup breaker was shorting out, and the voltage regulator was long past its service date. The air above the ceiling panels was stifling, dust and metal clinging to his skin. After nearly an hour of crawling and tinkering, he emerged with a t-shirt stained from work, sweat damp at the collar. "You okay?" A soft female voice broke into his thoughts. Clara stood beside her cart, a plain white paper cup in hand, steam curling upward. The rich scent of coffee drifted over, pushing aside the musty air of the ballroom. "I saw you working in here for a while. Thought you might need this," she said. Placing the cup on the lid of his toolbox, he blinked, a faint crease between his brows. "Thanks. But you're busy." "One extra cup of coffee doesn't slow anyone down," she replied with a small smile, before turning back to her stack of sheets. He stood there for a moment, watching her walk away. Her high ponytail swayed lightly with each step. He couldn't remember the last time someone had handed him something, just because they thought he might need it. Ethan carried the coffee out to the rear balcony of the ballroom. The late afternoon sea breeze carried a faint saltiness, tinged with the lingering damp of the morning fog. He took a sip. It wasn't high-end coffee, but something about it tasted different. Maybe because it came from someone with no reason to notice him, yet did anyway. The cup was warm in his hands, but what warmed him more was the simple feeling of being seen. And in that moment, he realized he wanted to see Clara more. That evening, after her shift ended, Clara returned to her small staff room at the far end of the fourth-floor hall. As soon as she opened the door, she froze. On the folding table against the wall sat a plain brown paper bag. She stepped closer and opened it. Inside was a lavender-scented bag of laundry detergent and a free laundry card for the staff laundry room in the basement. No note, no sign of who had left it. Clara sat on the bed, turning the plastic card in her fingers. The faint lavender reminded her of the rare times she could wash Leo's clothes with warm water and fragrant soap. She didn't know who had done this, but the feeling that someone had noticed and quietly helped warmed her chest in a way she couldn't quite name. The next morning at the community daycare, Leo beamed as he opened his cubby. "Mom, look." He held up a brand new box of crayons. "I think my teacher gave it to me." Clara glanced toward the teacher, who only smiled and shook her head without a word. She crouched down, hugging Leo tight, a small gift. But to him, it was a treasure to draw more dinosaurs racing across paper. A few days later, something unexpected happened. That day, the hotel hosted a business luncheon buffet for a group of executives. The ground floor restaurant was packed. The clink of silverware against plates mixed with the hum of conversation, and the air was thick with the aroma of steak and seafood chowder. Clara was clearing a table near the window when the scrape of a chair and a violent coughing fit erupted from the center of the room. An older man in a gray suit clutched his throat, his face flushing red, then deepening toward purple. A few women screamed. Silverware clattered to the floor. Clara sprinted toward him. "Everyone, stand back." Her voice was sharp. Steady, she stepped behind him, wrapped her arms around his middle, hands locked just below the sternum. One hard upward thrust. Nothing. A second time. The third out popped a trembling cube of red jello, sliding across the tablecloth. The man collapsed into his chair, gasping. Sweat beaded his forehead. Clara knelt on one knee, holding his shoulder so he wouldn't fall, checking his breathing, asking a few questions to make sure he was stable. "Are you a nurse?" the man wheezed, his voice still hoarse. Clara smiled faintly and shook her head. "Used to be a med student. I just remember a few things." A staff member brought him a glass of water, and the crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring but with eyes full of admiration. Clara only nodded, then quietly returned to her half-cleared table. From across the room, Ethan had seen everything. He stood leaning against the bar, the coffee in his hand long since gone cold. Clara calm in chaos, giving clear orders, executing every move precisely, and offering a reassuring smile once the danger had passed, stayed etched in his mind. This wasn't just a woman in need of help. This was a woman who could save others and did it without seeking credit. That night, before leaving the hotel, Ethan stopped outside Clara's door. He didn't knock. Instead, he slipped a small card under the crack. "Thank you for saving our guest's life today." Next to the card, he left a green dinosaur keychain, the same kind Leo often drew. He didn't know if Clara would guess it was from him, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she knew someone had seen her and appreciated her. In her little room, Clara picked up the gift. Her fingers traced the ridges of the plastic dinosaur, her lips curving into a faint smile, not because of the object itself, but because of the feeling that somewhere out there, an invisible thread was slowly tying her to someone she didn't yet fully understand, but instinctively trusted. The seventh-floor hallway glowed under fluorescent lights. Somewhere down the corridor, a vacuum hummed faintly. Clara was making a final check of her room list before ending her shift when the floor manager's voice cut through the air, sharp and loud enough for staff at the far end to turn and look. "Monroe, over here, now." She stepped forward to find him holding a room inspection clipboard, his expression locked in a scowl. "I just got feedback from the guest in 714. The bathtub's dirty. He says there's still a stain at the bottom. How do you explain that?" Clara drew a quiet breath, keeping her tone even. "I scrubbed it twice, but there's a leak in the water line. The water's carrying rust from the pipe." I don't want excuses." His voice sliced over hers, fingers tapping hard against the clipboard. "If you can't clean a bathtub properly, maybe this isn't the place for you." She bit her lip, her fingers tightening around the pen in her hand. The other staff avoided her gaze, but everyone could hear. At the far end of the hall, Ethan stepped out of the maintenance room, a coil of electrical cable slung over his shoulder. He caught the whole exchange. Walking over, his voice came low but clear. "You said 714. The floor manager shot him a glance. "Yeah. Why?" "Because..." Ethan reached into his maintenance shirt pocket and pulled out a duplicate maintenance report. "The hot water pipe in 714 has been leaking since last week. The water picks up rust from the line, which causes the stain. It's scheduled for repair tomorrow morning." This isn't a housekeeping issue. The air seemed to freeze. The floor manager's posture faltered for a moment before he forced a reply. "I don't recall that report." "That's because you don't read the daily maintenance logs," Ethan said flatly, his eyes holding steady. "I signed it myself." A beat of heavy silence. The floor manager pressed his lips together, gave a curt nod, and walked away. Clara stood there, eyes wide, too startled to respond. Ethan met her gaze for just a second, gave a small nod. "It's fine," and turned back toward the maintenance room. That afternoon, Ethan was called to the branch office. Inside, the head of HR and the branch GM were waiting. Their voices were firm, though not raised. "Ward, we've had a complaint from the floor manager. You overstepped," contradicting him in front of staff and guests. "That's against internal protocol." Sitting upright, fingers interlaced, Ethan said, "I didn't contradict him to embarrass him. I stated the truth. The responsibility was maintenance's, not housekeeping's. You need to remember we have procedures. You can't just insert yourself like that," the GM said, emphasizing the word procedures. Ethan didn't answer immediately. In his mind was the image of Clara standing in that hallway, blamed in front of everyone for something she didn't cause. He had been there cut off mid-sentence, misjudged, treated as if his voice wasn't worth hearing. "Understood," he finally said, taking the written warning they handed him. Without glancing at it, he folded it and slipped it into his pocket. Outside the office, he paused at the end of the hall, looking out the glass doors. The sky was a dull gray, rain misting against the panes. He felt no regret. If the choice was between staying silent to preserve procedure or speaking up to protect the truth, he'd choose the latter, whatever it cost him. It was 2 days after the hallway incident when the atmosphere in the hotel began to change. Every table in the staff lounge carried a printed notice in color, announcing a special live stream at noon today from Harbor Light Hotel's leadership, revealing a company-wide staffing initiative. Clara picked up the sheet, blinking in mild surprise. Corporate live streams were usually for the bigger branches, but this time, every employee was invited to watch. She wasn't particularly invested, but curiosity tugged at her. By midday, the lounge was packed. A large screen flickered on, opening with the Harbor Light logo and a brief, polished musical cue. Then the camera swept across the lobby of another hotel grand, high-ceilinged, bathed in golden light. Below were rows of shareholders, senior management, and press. Clara stood in the back, hugging her work folder, eyes only half on the screen. Then the host said, "And now, please welcome the CEO and founder of Harbor Light Hotels, Mr. Ethan Ward." A man walked out from backstage, deep blue suit, crisp white shirt, matching tie. His steps were measured, steady. The spotlight lit his face. Clara froze. Ethan. Gone was the worn gray t-shirt, the heavy tool bag. This was Ethan, but not the man she thought she knew. His smile was professional, his gaze locked on the camera, and he shook hands with shareholders. The voice over the speakers rang out. "For the past 3 months, I've been working directly in multiple branches across the network as a regular staff member to see firsthand what our employees face each day." Clara heard every word, but her mind spun. 3 months as a regular staff member. She gripped the folder tighter. Ethan went on, "I've met extraordinary people, single mothers, immigrants, students working through school, veterans rejoining civilian life. Their resilience is the foundation of this brand." The camera moved in close. Those smoky gray eyes were no longer the reserved gaze of a maintenance worker. They held confidence and authority now. He spoke of new initiatives, better benefits, revised leave policies, tuition support, and cutting through internal bureaucracy. But Clara didn't hear the rest. In her head, only one thought pulsed. He knew from the beginning. He knew who I was, how I lived, and still let me believe he was just another maintenance worker. Her chest tightened. So the gifts, the coffee, the small check-ins, were they real or just material for this speech? On screen, applause thundered. Ethan bowed his head in thanks and stepped down from the podium. Around her, co-workers whispered in awe. So he really is the CEO. No wonder. Clara said nothing. Her grip on the folder wrinkled the papers inside. In her chest, a hollow weight spread outward. When the live stream ended, she slipped quietly from the room. She went straight to her locker, pulled out her bag, and opened the small pocket to take out her ID card. The plastic felt cold in her hand. She stood still for a moment, looking at it as if it were a piece of herself she was about to leave behind. Then she unclipped the lanyard and set the card on the HR manager's desk. "I'd like to take a leave of absence," she said simply. "Clara, is something wrong?" She just shook her head, smiling faintly, though her eyes had lost their usual light. "I just need some time to think." Outside, the afternoon sea breeze carried a briny edge. Clara walked quickly through the side exit to the street. Each step pushed her further from the golden glow of the hotel, the place she'd thought might be a point of steady ground. What she felt wasn't a flare of anger, but a cold, quiet wave, the ache of believing someone had truly seen her, only to wonder if she had simply been part of a story they wanted to tell. 3 days had passed since Clara walked out of the hotel. Ethan had never known a time to feel this heavy. He still worked, still signed papers and answered emails, but it all moved as if through a fog. Her staff ID card still sat on the HR manager's desk. The housekeeping cart she used to push had been rolled into storage, its wheels gathering a thin layer of dust. The places where he had been used to seeing her, the 6th-floor hallway, the linen closet, the staff lounge were now empty. He had texted, called, no reply. On Friday morning, while glancing over his schedule, Ethan remembered something she'd once told him. Leo loved show-and-tell Fridays at the elementary school near the community daycare. His eyes would light up as he shared a favorite item with his classmates. She had said it was one of the few moments when she felt her son could truly be himself. Ethan closed the schedule. He knew what he needed to do. That afternoon, the school's multi-purpose room buzzed with the sound of children's chatter and parents' conversations. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows. Long tables held trays of cookies and boxes of juice. Colorful drawings covered the walls. Dinosaurs, castles, and oceans in bright crayon strokes. Ethan stood at the back door, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Watching, he spotted Leo showing off a green plastic dinosaur nearly identical to the keychain Ethan had secretly given. The boy spoke with animated gestures, his friends laughing along. Clara stood off near the corner, talking to another parent. Her hair was loose today. No hotel uniform, just a beige sweater and simple jeans. She was smiling, but her eyes still carried the faint shadow of fatigue. Ethan drew in a deep breath. He approached the teacher, murmured something quietly. A few minutes later, she stepped to the front of the room. Today we have a special guest who'd like to say a few words. All eyes turned to the back as Ethan stepped forward. No suit this time, just a deep blue sweater. Khakis. Sneakers. He stood at the center, hands loosely clasped. I know I don't belong here. He began, his voice low but steady. And I'm not here to talk about my job or my company. I'm here because I made a mistake. The room fell silent. Only the faint whistle of wind through the window crack remained. I met someone who works harder than anyone I've ever known. She's raising her child on her own. No complaints. No fanfare. She treats everyone with genuine kindness, even when no one's paying attention. She reminded me what real strength is not the strength of power or money, but the strength it takes to get up every day and keep going. His eyes moved across the room, but he didn't search for Clara. He knew she was there, hearing every word. She doesn't know that I've been where she's been, empty hands, holding on only with determination. And maybe I was wrong not to tell her from the start who I was. But I want to be clear, I didn't help her because I'm a CEO. I helped because I remember what it feels like to be overlooked, to want someone to see you and believe you're worth it. His voice dipped lower. Everyone deserves help, no matter their status or past. Kindness doesn't need a stage, but sometimes it deserves one, a still moment. Then a small ripple of applause from one corner, spreading slowly across the room. Ethan gave a small bow of thanks, then stepped down and headed toward the back door. He didn't look for Clara's eyes, didn't try to reach for her hand. Clara remained in the corner, fingers wrapped around her juice cup. She had heard it all. Not every word was easy to take in, but there was one thing she couldn't deny. Ethan hadn't spoken to show off or to repair an image. He spoke like a man stripping away his armor in front of a room that belonged to her world. Not his. She watched his figure leave through the door, her heart beating faster. No, she wasn't ready to go back to the hotel. But the crack in the wall she had built around herself was widening, and somewhere inside, a small part of her felt lighter. That morning, the side lobby of the hotel was awash in early sunlight. Rays filtered through the tall glass windows, painting long golden streaks across the marble floor. The scent of fresh coffee from the staff lounge mingled with the faint perfume of fresh flowers at the reception desk. The shuffle of rolling suitcases, the chime of elevators, and the distant sound of ocean waves slipped in each time someone opened the door. The side entrance swung open. Clara stepped inside, uniform freshly pressed, hair neatly tied back, her familiar canvas tote in hand. She paused for a beat, drawing in a deep breath. Would people look at her differently now? The young bellhop spotted her first. His face lit up. "Welcome back, Clara." At the reception desk, the front desk clerk glanced up, nodding. "Great to have you back on the team." A chef pushing a food trolley passed by, gave a soft whistle, and a thumbs up. Even the housekeeping manager, known for her sparing compliments, stepped out from her office and offered a small smile. "We've had a room ready for you since this morning." No one asked why she'd left. No one pried about what had happened. There were only warm, simple greetings. Clara felt a layer of tension in her chest begin to ease. She pushed her cart down the familiar service corridor. Each step stirred memories of hurried mornings past the roll of the wheels, the soft rustle of linens, the faint tang of cleaning solution. Passing the maintenance room, she slowed. The door was ajar, and inside, Ethan was bent over, wiping down the surface of an old wooden chair. Light from the small window fell in a slant across his shoulder. The air smelled faintly of aged wood and machine oil. He looked up when he sensed her at the doorway. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The hallway noise faded, leaving a silence that was both taut and warm. Clara stepped in once, resting her hand lightly on the back of the chair. "You don't have to fix everything," she said softly, but clearly. The cloth in his hand stilled. "Just stay," she added, her gaze steady on him. Ethan set the rag down and straightened. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, his voice low, steady, like a confession of something he'd feared. "You didn't," Clara replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I just needed to find my way back." He held out his hand. She placed hers in it warm, steady, a simple clasp, but enough to close the distance of the past days. A week later, the hotel's main lobby transformed into a dinosaur wonderland. T-Rex and Stegosaurus balloons hung from the ceiling. Green tablecloths and gold-bowed chairs filled the space. On the long table sat a massive T-Rex-shaped cake, its mouth roaring above frosted words. "Happy birthday, Leo." Clara led Leo in. He froze, eyes wide, then burst out, "Wow," before she could react. He was off running from balloon to balloon, examining dinosaur stickers on each chair. Colleagues gathered, each holding a small gift, a Lego set, a dinosaur coloring book, a T-Rex model. Laughter rippled through the lobby. Ethan stood near the cake table, holding a bunch of dinosaur balloons. He had arranged everything from ordering the cake and buying the gifts to making sure everyone could join. Leo ran to him, wrapping small arms around his leg. Looking up, he asked, "Are you going to be my new dad?" The chatter around them seemed to slow. Ethan knelt, eyes seeking Clara's. She stood a few steps away, one hand resting over her heart, eyes shimmering. After a moment, she gave a small nod. Ethan smiled, pulling Leo into a full embrace. "If you want me to," he said, voice deep and warm, just loud enough for Clara to hear. Applause broke out. Leo grinned widely, clutching his neck, while Clara watched them, her heart easing like a door finally swinging open after too long shut. Months after the dinosaur birthday, a new notice went up on the staff lounge bulletin board. Harbor Light Scholarship Program, supporting employees in completing unfinished degrees. First recipient, Clara Monroe, to complete her medical degree, signed at the bottom, Ethan Ward. When she got the news, Clara stood still in front of the board. In her hand was an envelope containing full scholarship details, financial arrangements, and a class schedule tailored to fit her shifts. She thought back to that night in the maintenance room, Ethan holding her hand and saying, "Just stay." Now she understood it wasn't just about their relationship. It was about her dream, too. It didn't stop there. Ethan asked her to co-found the Harbor Light Foundation, a fund for single parents and those facing hardship with quiet resilience. The office was tucked into a corner of the hotel, so any staff could walk in without hesitation. On opening day, Ethan wore a simple shirt, standing beside Clara. Before them were co-workers, local press, and a few past recipients of help. Clara stepped up to the podium, holding her notes but barely glancing at them. "I used to think this job was just a way to make a living, but I've learned that sometimes kindness is a form of leadership. It doesn't need authority or titles, just the willingness to see and lift someone else. Everyone deserves the chance to keep chasing their dream, no matter where they started." Her gaze found Ethan in the front row. He smiled back, pride and warmth mingling in his eyes. That evening, Clara left work early to attend her night class. On the way, she stopped at the daycare to pick up Leo. He came running out, holding up a drawing, 3 figures standing on a beach, hand in hand. "I drew you and Dad," Leo beamed. They walked back toward the hotel, where Ethan waited at the entrance. No flowers, no formal greeting, just a crouch to hug Leo. Then a hand extended to Clara. She took it without hesitation. The sun dipped low, casting a golden wash over the distant ocean. The 3 of them strolled along the sand, waves curling softly over their ankles. Leo darted ahead, glancing back to call, "Come on, Mom, Dad." Ethan and Clara walked more slowly, fingers interlaced. She tilted her head, murmuring, "I'm still going to finish no matter how hard it gets." "I know," Ethan said, "and I'll be here until the day you put on that white coat." Clara smiled, tightening her grip. Ahead, Leo laughed as the waves chased his feet. They knew the road wouldn't always be smooth, but now they had each other and the courage to stay. Because sometimes a story doesn't need castles or magic, just a sink, a small act of kindness, and 2 hearts willing to walk forward together. Have you ever experienced a moment of kindness so powerful it made you stop, think, and change how you see people? Maybe it was a hug, the right words at the right time, or just the look someone gave you when you felt invisible. Share that story in the comments. Your experience might be the warmth someone out there needs to hear. And if Ethan, Clara, and Leo's journey has made you believe a little more in kindness, hit like. Share this video with the people you care about. And subscribe to American Stories so we can keep spreading stories that touch the heart. Because one small act of kindness can be the turning point for an entire life. Aye.